The last hope of Gaul, Vercingetorix. He made Caesar bleed, then died in Rome's darkness.
Late in the September of 52 BC, the hilltop fortress of Alesia was surrounded by an unprecedented feat of military engineering, 25 miles of dual Roman fortifications constructed by the legions of Julius Caesar. Inside the blockade, tens of thousands of Gallic warriors were starving. Outside, a massive relief force of tribal allies had been violently shattered. In the heavy, defeated quiet that followed the final battle, a solitary figure rode out from the besieged wooden gates. Wearing his most magnificent armor and riding a fully caberneted horse, the Gallic chieftain circled the Roman tribunal where Caesar sat. Then, according to historical accounts, he dismounted, stripped off his armor, and sat silently at the feet of his conqueror. This dramatic, almost theatrical act of surrender marked the death of free Gaul and the birth of a historical legend that would endure for more than 2 millennia. Vercingetorix was a chieftain of the Arverni, a powerful Celtic tribe located in modern-day central France. His name is a compound in the Gaulish language, widely translated by modern linguists as Great Warrior King or Victor of 100 Battles. Born around 80 BC in the region of Arverni, his nationality was Gallic, though Gaul at the time was not a unified nation, but a fractured landscape of competing factions. Operating primarily in the military and political arenas, Vercingetorix is considered historically influential because he achieved the seemingly impossible. He successfully united dozens of fiercely independent, often warring Celtic tribes into a single cohesive military coalition to fight against the expansion of the Roman Republic. Vercingetorix was born into the Arverni of the Arverni, one of the wealthiest and most militarily dominant tribes in central Gaul. During the 1st century BC, Celtic Europe was undergoing rapid economic and social changes. The Arverni derived immense power from regional gold mines and extensive trade networks reaching down to the Mediterranean. However, the political environment was notoriously unstable. Gaul was a patchwork quilt of over 60 distinct tribes, constantly vying for dominance through shifting alliances. Vercingetorix's father, Celtillus, had been the foremost leader among the Arverni and held immense sway over neighboring tribes. However, Celtillus's ambition proved fatal. When he attempted to dismantle the tribal republic to declare himself an absolute monarch, he was executed by his own people, including his brother Gobernitio. Vercingetorix came of age in the shadow of his father's assassination. Raised with the elite education of a Celtic noble, he was likely instructed by the Druidic class in philosophy, law, and rhetoric, while also receiving rigorous training in horsemanship and infantry tactics. The defining disruption of Vercingetorix's life occurred in 58 BC, when Julius Caesar arrived in Gaul under the pretext of protecting Roman allies from migrating Germanic tribes. Over the next several years, Caesar launched a brutal campaign of subjugation. The sheer scale of the devastation shaped Vercingetorix's worldview. The Greek historian Plutarch later claimed that during the Gallic Wars, Caesar fought 3 million men, killed 1 million, and enslaved another million. While modern historians debate and often reduce these numbers, acknowledging Caesar's propensity for propaganda, the demographic and cultural trauma inflicted upon Gaul was undeniably catastrophic. It is highly probable that as a young nobleman, Vercingetorix served as an auxiliary cavalry commander in Caesar's army during the early years of the war. This was a common practice for Gallic aristocrats. By riding alongside the Romans, Vercingetorix learned the secrets of Roman siege warfare, logistics, and legionary discipline. This inside knowledge, combined with the growing desperation of his people as Roman garrisons occupied their ancestral lands, transformed him from a privileged noble into a hardened, highly strategic revolutionary. Vercingetorix's transition from a tribal aristocrat to a public revolutionary began in the bitter winter of 53 to 52 BC. The spark was ignited by the Carnutes tribe, who slaughtered a community of Roman merchants at the trading hub of Cenabum, modern Orleans. Recognizing that the Romans were vulnerable while Caesar was wintering south of the Alps, Vercingetorix called his dependents to arms in the Arverni capital of Gergovia. His uncle, Gobernitio, viewing this rebellion as suicidal, expelled Vercingetorix from the city. Undeterred, Vercingetorix scoured the countryside, raising an army of rural outcasts, impoverished farmers, and disaffected warriors. With this makeshift force, he returned to Gergovia, overthrew his uncle's faction, and was officially declared king of the Arverni. He immediately dispatched emissaries to tribes across the region, the Senones, Parisi, Pictones, and Turones, demanding hostages to ensure their loyalty and forging the first true pan-Gallic alliance. The breakthrough moment that solidified Vercingetorix's reputation as a lethal tactician came in the spring of 52 BC, when he implemented a ruthless, scorched earth policy. Realizing that the Gallic infantry could not defeat the Roman legions in open-pitched battle, Vercingetorix ordered his people to burn their own farms, villages, and grain stores. By systematically destroying the landscape, he intended to starve Caesar's advancing army. In a single day, over 20 towns of the Bituriges tribe were set ablaze. However, the Bituriges begged Vercingetorix to spare their grandest city, Avaricum, modern Bourges. Against his better judgment, he relented, a decision that would cost them dearly. Caesar besieged Avaricum, eventually breaching the walls. The Romans, starved and enraged, massacred the inhabitants. Caesar reported that out of 40,000 residents, only 800 survived to reach Vercingetorix's camp. Paradoxically, this horrific defeat validated Vercingetorix's scorched earth strategy in the eyes of the other tribal leaders. His authority became absolute, and his forces swelled. The defining events of Vercingetorix's career all occurred within the crucible of the year 52 BC. Following the disaster at Avaricum, he led his army to his heavily fortified hometown of Gergovia. Here, Vercingetorix achieved his greatest military victory. Utilizing the high ground and refusing to engage on Caesar's terms, he baited the Romans into a disastrous uphill assault. The Romans were routed, suffering heavy casualties, including the loss of 46 centurions and nearly 700 legionaries. It was the first time Caesar had faced a comprehensive defeat in Gaul. Following Gergovia, the rebellion peaked, but a subsequent cavalry skirmish at the Vingian River went poorly for the Gauls. Vercingetorix made the fateful decision to retreat his infantry, numbering roughly 80,000 men, into the fortified town of Alesia. Caesar pursued him and initiated one of the most famous sieges in military history. Recognizing that a direct assault on the hilltop was impossible, Caesar ordered his legions to build a circumvallation, an inner wall 11 miles in circumference to lock the Gauls in. When Vercingetorix managed to smuggle cavalry through the unfinished lines to summon a massive relief army, Caesar built a contravallation, an outer wall 14 miles in circumference to defend against the reinforcements. In the autumn of 52 BC, the Gallic relief force, which Caesar claimed numbered 250,000 men, though modern historians suggest 80,000 to 100,000 is more accurate, attacked the outer walls while Vercingetorix attacked from the inside. The Romans held the line. The Gallic relief army was routed, forcing Vercingetorix to formally surrender to prevent the complete annihilation of his starving people inside Alesia. Vercingetorix is famous for being the first individual in history to unite the fractured Celtic tribes of Gaul into a coherent, functioning nation-state, albeit a temporary one. He is celebrated not just for his resistance to Rome, but for the sophisticated evolution of his military tactics. Rather than relying on the traditional, disorganized Celtic charges that had failed previous generations, he instituted Roman-style logistics, rigorous cavalry training, and asymmetric guerrilla warfare. His reputation was cemented paradoxically by his greatest enemy. Because Julius Caesar extensively documented the war in his Commentari de Bello Gallico, Vercingetorix was immortalized in Roman literature. Caesar portrayed him as a brilliant, formidable, and noble adversary. By elevating Vercingetorix's military genius, Caesar subsequently magnified his own glory in defeating him. As a human being, Vercingetorix was driven by a powerful mix of personal ambition and genuine patriotism. He was fiercely intelligent and an exceptional communicator, capable of persuading rival chiefs who had hated his family for generations to place their warriors under his absolute command. However, his leadership style was notoriously draconian. Caesar notes that Vercingetorix maintained discipline through terror. He would routinely order the ears of cowards to be cut off, or their eyes gouged out, before sending them back to their home villages as a grim warning to others. He was uncompromising and believed that total sacrifice was required to defeat Rome. His tactical genius lay in his flexibility. He was willing to destroy his own country's infrastructure to save its autonomy. Yet his great weakness was arguably the deeply ingrained Celtic system of tribal politics he was forced to navigate, which often required him to make political concessions, such as sparing Avaricum, that contradicted his military instincts. Vercingetorix was not without significant flaws, and his ultimate failure was rooted in a critical strategic miscalculation at Alesia. By retreating his massive infantry force into a static, enclosed fortress, he surrendered the mobility that had made his guerrilla campaign so successful. He vastly underestimated the engineering capabilities of the Roman legions. He believed Caesar would simply run out of supplies and abandon the siege. Instead, the Romans built a fortress around his fortress in a matter of weeks. Furthermore, ethical criticisms can be leveled at his decisions during the siege. As starvation set in at Alesia, Vercingetorix and the tribal council made the harrowing decision to expel the non-combatants, the women, children, and elderly residents of the Mandubi tribe who owned the town. They hoped the Romans would feed them or let them pass. Instead, Caesar ordered his men to keep the gates closed, and the civilians slowly starved to death in the no-man's land between the city and the Roman walls. It remains one of the darkest, most controversial moments of his leadership. In the short term, Vercingetorix's rebellion drastically delayed the Roman pacification of Gaul and forced Rome to expend immense resources. However, his defeat at Alesia effectively ended Free Gaul. In the aftermath, the region was fully absorbed into the Roman Empire, adopting Latin culture, Roman law, and Roman architecture for the next 500 years. On a broader geopolitical scale, the impact of his defeat was monumental. By conquering Vercingetorix, Julius Caesar acquired the unimaginable wealth, loyal veteran legions, and political prestige necessary to march on Rome. Thus, the fall of Vercingetorix directly enabled the civil war that destroyed the Roman Republic and established the Roman Empire. As for Vercingetorix himself, his surrender led to an agonizing 6-year imprisonment in the dark subterranean Tullianum Mamertine prison in Rome. In 46 BC, he was paraded through the streets during Caesar's quadruple triumph, after which he was quietly executed by strangulation. For nearly 2,000 years, Vercingetorix was largely forgotten, preserved only in Latin texts read by scholars. However, his image underwent a massive revival in the 19th century under Emperor Napoleon III of France. Looking for a unifying national symbol of indigenous French courage, Napoleon III funded massive archaeological digs at Alesia. In 1865, Napoleon III commissioned a towering 7-meter-tall copper statue of Vercingetorix to be erected at the site of the siege. Vercingetorix was subsequently written into French textbooks as the first national hero of France. Today, he permeates popular culture, most notably inspiring the cultural spirit behind the beloved French comic series Asterix. While modern historians view him more objectively as an ambitious tribal leader rather than a modern nationalist, he remains a potent symbol of anti-imperial resistance. The life of Vercingetorix reveals the tragic limits of even the most brilliant leadership when faced with an overwhelming industrialized military machine. He possessed the intelligence to adapt to his enemy and the charisma to forge unity out of chaos, achieving what no Gallic leader had ever done. Yet his story is ultimately a testament to the brutal reality of history. that courage and tactical genius are sometimes not enough to overcome the relentless machinery of empire. Though he died defeated in the dark depths of a Roman prison, Vercingetorix's legacy outlived the empire that killed him, transforming a momentary surrender into an immortal symbol of defiance.